Hello world! Welcome to the Pico Pori show, where I'm going to look at magic crayons on the Pico because I'm out of games to look at. Yep, this is another copy of Richard Scarry's Huckle and Lolly's Busiest Day Ever. Okay, well, guess we're done with Pico and I have no idea what to do now. I'll eat a snack to jog the memory and to figure out what I'm doing. What's this? An M&M's based video game for the Game Boy Advance? M&M's Break 'em. Oh, okay. I think it's a bit surreal that an M&M's game exists, but okay, we'll roll with it. This is M&M's Break 'em, and this game actually has a plot to it. You start off in space, and apparently someone named Mr. Runch is on the loose. It appears that Mr. Runch is basically a bad M&M that didn't meet the standards, and the Mars method for getting rid of bad M&M's is to combat them in space. They do this in real life too, by the way. For some reason, the red M&M is dressed up like one of the Men in Black or something. You choose a character, and the red M&M has a paper map that somehow knows where Mr. Runch has been located, so I guess it's time to go after him. You start on an island and then you pick a level. This is definitely not what I was expecting. Okay, so I was expecting a shallow platformer or something along those lines, but what I got is something else. I guess the name Break 'em is appropriate because it's a breakout style game, only with more bells and whistles to it. You basically change the color of your M&M by hitting the color blocks, and then you hit the blocks that match the color of your M&M to complete levels, all while avoiding these skull blocks that sometimes kill you, and collecting snacks for bonus points. You control the direction that you bounce, but there's really not much more to this. It's painfully simple, but I guess it's fine if you play it in small spurts. There really isn't much personality to this game, and what's up with the spotted eggs on the top of the mountain in the background? Is this M&M's Break 'em or Link's Awakening? Guess the world will never know. After every set of levels, it seems that there's also a boss fight. This first one was a bird located on the totally not Zelda-inspired mountaintop. I got pretty bored of this, and I opted to take a break, so I turned the game off, and then I hit the real deal breaker. This game doesn't save the password system. I mean, I get that this is probably a budget title due to being a food advert game, but come on. This game was literally released in 2006. The Nintendo DS was already out when this game dropped. It's wild. Another thing I tend to do when I play through games, due to time management and all that, is I try to get a general grasp for how long a game is going to be before I commit to playing through it. According to the internet, this thing is 31 hours long. Now that may be, and it probably is, inaccurate, but I'm sure as heck not finding out. And I'm not playing this tedious game for 31 hours, if that's even a possibility. I think playing through one set of stages is enough to grasp what this game is about. It's okay. I mean, if you can get it for like $1, you know, and you like this kind of game, maybe give it a go. So imagine my surprise when I discovered that there is a video game based on hard chocolate candy that is M&M's. Well, there's actually a lot of them, and we're going to take a look at a bunch of them. First, let's take a look at M&M's Blast, also on the GBA. I'm honestly going into most of these games blind, and I really have no clue what to expect. I tend to do this a lot with games overall. Even the title screen doesn't really explain much. I'll pick the name of the player who played this last. I am Zach Ebb. You pick a character, much like the last game, in a setting to which I chose Haunted House because I like spooky things. The first game was a breakout style game, but this game, it's a Mario Party clone, but it's a really boring Mario Party clone. You don't get mini games between each turn like the game that this was inspired by. In fact, I don't even know the algorithm for getting minigames, period. It just sort of seems random. Otherwise, you just roll dice and go around the board. Most of the spaces don't really do anything. Sure, you collect M&M minis instead of coins, but that's about it. And every now and then you get the option to switch with the other player. Does this even have a negative effect? I don't know. The minigames are pretty awful too, like catch M&Ms where you move way too slow, a really scuffed top-down racing segment where you hunt down the minis, and probably the worst golfing I've ever had to do in a video game. No, really, this is actually that bad. All this tied together by a boring game board with these weird sounds that you make every time you walk over a space. In this game, your currency is seemingly M&M minis. But what about a whole game based on M&M minis lore, apparently? Here's M&M's Minis Madness. This one's a bit older and it was released on the Game Boy Color, a console that definitely does not have any shovelware. This one also has a plot to it. You start off outside the window of what appears to be the M&M's factory late at night. The red M&M is in the factory on the computer looking at pornography, and the computer system is said to have been destroyed, likely due to him going to some very sketchy websites. Yellow asks why the factory has gone haywire, and Red claims he doesn't know. I think you do know. This game's a platformer, something I semi-expected the last two games to be, but this was bound to happen eventually. The first level has you in the factory that the red M&M destroyed, and you just traverse the level while collecting M&M minis. The levels aren't great designs or anything, and to add insult to injury, the controls are pretty unresponsive and stiff. The enemies are just glorious, jumping boxes and really tiny forklifts. No wonder this factory is so unproductive. There was a point where I thought I was stuck, but it turns out you can swap between the characters. Each one has their own respective ability. Thankfully, Yellow can jump pretty well, so I was able to move on. Aside from that, this game's really bland and not very good. M&M's game on the Game Boy Color being bad? That's a shocker. I like that at some points you get these skateboards, but you can only ride them for like 2 seconds before you hit a very poorly placed enemy. Thanks a ton. You know, these games are pretty spicy, but they're not spicy enough, so we're gonna go to a console that's more qualified for it. Let's check it out. M&M's Wii games. First on the Wii, we got M&M's Kart Racing because it's the least interesting of the three from the get-go. You get a title screen followed by a loading screen that's in Comic Sans. Before I start, I gotta say that the first red flag is apparent on the box. When you're looking at Wii games, if the top right corner of the back of the box only has a picture of the Wiimote, there's a pretty high chance of it being a motion control heavy shovelware mess. I very rarely see good games that exclusively use the Wiimote. And with that said, my concerns were justified. While it absolutely works better than some Wii racing games I've played, the controls are way too sensitive and I kept crashing and even at some points getting stuck when I probably shouldn't have. You pick your M&M color, your kart, and your track. It appears there's about 10 tracks, but you only have like 3 or 4 unlocked from the get-go, and I'm not grinding out this mess of the game to unlock them. Other than that, it's just racing. There aren't even items to use. It's generally just very bland, and there's no reason why they couldn't have given you the option to use the nunchuck as well. On the plus side though, this game does exist on the Nintendo DS too, but I've never played it, so I can't entirely confirm, but I'm assuming it at least controls better there. Also, this game only supports 2-player, which is a shame. Big staple of kart racing in general is, 4-player split screen, but I guess they knew that you wouldn't be able to get more than 2 people, let alone 1 person who would actually want to sit down and play this budget shipwreck. And speaking of shipwreck, we have M&M's Beach Party for the Wii as well. Again, only uses the Wiimote, huge red flag. You start off by picking your M&M and it puts you in this hub world, which is just a deserted island, I guess, but there's no one around at all. This game is even more bare basic than the kart racer. You have a few mini games that you can embark in, but in order to play them, you have to wander around the island with some very subpar tank controls, by the way, and use your D-pad to wander around and collect seashells, because apparently apparently if you don't collect any seashells, you can't play anything. There's only 20 or so to collect in the entire game, and it's easy enough, it only takes a few minutes. Every few you collect unlocks a new game. The first one I unlocked was a ring toss game where you just toss rings onto a buoy off the dock. As predicted, it's done by motion controls. You hold down B and swing and let go and hope that it lands. It works fine and it's playable, but it's not what I would call fun. The next one I unlocked was a volleyball game, and once again, motion control heavy. This one was literally unplayable to me though. I'm sure I did something wrong, but I couldn't even serve it. It just kept failing to do so. I don't know. I'm moving on. I don't have time for this. As I collected more seashells, I unlocked Mr. Runch in the next game I got. I guess Mr. Runch is a key character in the MCU, the M&M cinematic universe. Though, when I played the game, which was called Colorinator, I didn't notice Mr. Runch anywhere. Colorinator is basically a shooting gallery style minigames, but since they obviously weren't going to actually give the M&Ms like guns, although that would rule, it's just flinging paint on the black and white characters and making them the proper color, and then the color that lands the most wins. As you can imagine, it's nothing great, it just kind of exists. Next is Skee Ball, which is probably the best piece on this package. It's motion control heavy, but it works just fine. I mean, maybe I'm just a huge sucker for Skee Ball. Then we got the Mr. Runch themed game called Mr. Runch Slam, where you basically catapult Mr. Runch, I'm saying Mr. Runch a lot, onto the pads. It's a typical carnival game, but it doesn't work. I mean, I definitely landed this thing more than 2 times, and even looking back at my footage, despite landing it, I just wasn't gaining points. So while it's kind of playable, it's bad and it's broken because you literally don't score most of the time. Then you got kayaking, which you just row with the Wiimote. It works, but I never got it to go fast enough to actually win. And yeah, that's literally it. M&M's Beach Party, I was kind of expecting to be in a similar category to M&M's Blast on a GBA, being like a Mario Party ripoff, but it's just a minigame collection. A terrible minigame collection that only has 6 games on it. I mean, I know that this game was likely sold for dirt cheap at release as a budget title, but geez, you could have at least put more in this package than 6 games, but at least you can play the 15 minutes worth of content with 4 players. I'm looking at you, M&M's Kart Racing. But we got one more Wii game, M&M's Adventure, and as you can imagine, an adventure what this game is, and it has more M&M's lore where the red, yellow, and green M&M's are in the office, and hopefully Red doesn't screw up the computer he's at again. And while the system does seem to screw up, I don't think it's actually his fault this time. It's Christmas time and the system goofs up. The M&M's have to stay late to fix it because I guess that's how Mars probably operates in real life as well. All the captions read in glorious Comic Sans. I mean, is Comic Sans the preferred font of M&M's? Green tries to maintain the computer herself, and yellow is just a lazy piece of who naps, and it's up to you to play as Red and gather M&Ms and money and stuff. It's just a collectathon platformer, and it controls okay. This game generally has pretty simple platform levels, and there's nothing really to write home about. You just jump around on platforms and collect stuff, and sometimes there's levels where you can get these like wings and you can fly around for some reason. After you collect some M&Ms, which I guess are sort of similar to the stars in Mario 64, you unlock a string of levels in the Valentine's sector. Again, basic platforming levels. I don't know what else to say. 6 stages in, though, I get my very first boss fight where I have to fight Cupid. Apparently M&Ms hate love, and they're gonna ruin it for everyone by electrocuting Cupid. After one hit, though, Cupid just stays in one area. None of the platforms come out to activate the new electrical things. I don't know. Did the game break? I guess so. I tried to figure it out, but I had no idea. In this game, while I wouldn't call it a bad game, at least up until this point, it's just too bland for me to care. It's probably more the same for the entirety of the playthrough anyway, so we'll move on. I'm gonna guess every world is themed after a holiday or something, but that's just me being presumptuous, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. These games are a mess, but we gotta look at the main event, which is M&M Shell Shocked on the PlayStation 1. Oh yeah. The plot of this game, according to the back of the box, which by the way is also in glorious Comic Sans, seems to be at least somewhat similar to the Minis Madness game on Game Boy Color. Given that they were released within about a year of each other, I'm gonna guess that's not a coincidence. And was I really wrong? Not really. The plot also has to do with the Minis ruining the joint, and only this time you get FMV segments which are on par with the M&M's commercials, and they do look good for what they are. Segments aren't really anything worth mentioning outside of they're okay, but I'm taking in tons of M&M's lore, and before working on this video, the deepest it really went was that Christmas ad where they make Santa pass out, and I mean that's been playing every holiday season for the past like 30 years. But on to the actual game. The game opens up with a driving stage. You don't even press gas in this, you just go left and right and don't crash. That's it. There's boxes to collect, but they're strictly M&M minis, which if you collect 100 of them, you get an extra life. So while they are worthless, they at least have some value to an extent. I mean, it plays fine. At least it controls better than the disaster that M&M's Kart Racer was. But I really hope this isn't the full package. The following two stages are more of the same, and as you progress further, the other drivers on the road really drive like assholes. It's a good simulation of my home in Pennsylvania. But finally, we're on to an actual level. Now, a lot of people told me before that this is a Crash Bandicoot ripoff, and I mean, yeah, it has narrow levels, but come on. Okay, I'll take the L on that one. This is definitely a Crash Bandicoot ripoff, and a blatant one at that. So in addition to the narrow stages, you play through as the yellow M&M, who's the protagonist of this entire experience, and it's so similar to Crash. Only the controls have issues and the stages aren't designed great, but we'll get deeper into that. And it's not just regular boxes either. You also got the TNT crates, and you even got the Nitro crates in this that function in the same way as they do in Deep Bandicoot's endeavors. Why are there Nitro crates in the M&M's factory? I don't know. Are they in there in real life? Enemies are, I think, robots? I'm not sure. But it's one-hit KOs, though you can get a hard hat power-up that's not unlike Aku Aku. Some of their hits are really unfair, and the hit detection's a little wonky. Plus, there's just so many other things that can kill you in these stages, like this stream of turds. Okay, they're chocolate, but I mean, that even makes less sense. How does chocolate kill you in a game where you're playing as a character that's made out of chocolate? That'd be like if you played Doom and you died if you got blood splattered on you. Each set of levels, besides the first trilogy of driving segments, is set into 3 levels, and the third one is always a boss fight of some sort. The first one is some sort of weird UFO thing where you hop from platform to platform in hopes of it getting pooed on. Totally not inspired by the Ripperoo boss fight at all. I mean, it's easy enough though. But then, just more stages. Sadly, there's not much variety in this. The entire game, as far as I saw, took place in the factory, and it's just a lot of factory settings. There's 8 sets of 3 stages in all, and the next 2 levels are basically the same idea, only a bit more complex with conveyor belts and stuff. A thing I found particularly weird about this stage is the fact that you can't touch the floor in certain areas, it just kills you. Great game design you got there. The second boss you encounter, aka the boss of the third set of stages, is pretty simple. You pretty much just run away from it down a conveyor belt while setting off TNT crates, but after that is more of the same type of levels, only with colors this time. I mean, fair enough, but I feel like this game is going to have to do more than the same old, but with colors. And speaking on that subject matter, the boss fight in this set of levels is literally just that. It's a rehash of the first boss fight. That's totally not inspired by Ripperoo, where you hop from platform to run from the spaceship and hope that colors fall on it as opposed to chocolate. And with that, they meet up with the green M&M, but I don't really care about this plot anymore, and I just want to get through this thing. More of the same follows, only this time we got side-scrolling levels, and I mean, they're pretty much the same exact thing as Crash Bandicoot side-scrolling levels, so just go off of that. That's basically what this whole package comes down to. Just picture classic Crash Bandicoot, making control horribly, make it look hideous, add M&Ms, and decrease the quality of stages, and there you go. You got M&M Shell Shock. I really wanted to go into this game and try to not reference the Bandicoot, but the similarities are just uncanny, and it's a shameless, blatant ripoff. The boss of these levels is weird too. It's like a strange matching game. Basically, you're chasing after this boss that drops items and you have to match them with the button. I guess the button activates something that destroys the item. I don't know. But I mean, it's stupidly easy, so that's fine. But with that, we're back to driving stages. This time around, you're driving a forklift while avoiding boxes. Boxes that don't have minis in them, that is. Because the metal boxes will insta-KO you. It's kind of tricky and it's hard to keep up with, but it's doable at least. We got 2 of these, followed by a boss in the 3rd one, which is just basically rapidly throwing boxes out of the back and you have to dodge them. It's also kind of tricky, but it's fine. But with that, we're at the last world, and once again, same thing. I'm tired of talking about this. I completely forgot to bring up a few other areas even at that, but there's just nothing to really say, but it's more the same. And there's this one boss that you run from, which reminds me of another Crash Bandicoot level. But we're in World 8 now, darn it. We're skipping ahead, and this is sort of where it hit the fans for me. Now granted, it is the end of the game, but man, this was a pain. This time it's the same idea, but with electricity this time. Yeah. The first level was very stressful to progress through, and I made it to the end, and actually I thought I died, but then it moved me on to the next level, so I was like, okay, I'll take it, that's fine. The second last stage, and presumably the actual final level, oh my god, this one is a mess. It's just a feast of trial and error, poor stage design, and a showcase for how flawed the controls are. The depth perception is off, and sometimes it's hard to land a proper jump. On top of that, the physics are pretty wonky too. Like, you'll ride on this slow moving platform and try to jump off of it during it, and then you just go flying. I mean, I'm no expert, but I don't think that's how it works at all. Plus, all these stages just feel like they were amateurly made. I swear, I died in every nonsense way possible in this stage, and looking back, I sunk over an hour into just this level, and I don't even know if I made it then. It just keeps going and going, with new trial and error things to try. It's dreadful. Whether it's missing jumps due to poor depth perception, the poor controls, or just because the physics wanted to goof up. It just kept going and going. Not to mention the poorly placed enemies that just snipe you, the unpredictable electric currents that seem to have different patterns on every platform. Thank God there's continues, or I wouldn't have even made it here. I probably blew like 30 continues on just this level. And eventually I just had to give up when I got to the point where the platforms made me feel like I was tripping balls on acid. I got the idea what this game is about, and I'm ashamed that a goddamn game based on a chocolate candy made me this angry, but this game's kind of a mess. The controls aren't great, the levels are all over the place, and there was even a point where the camera just decided to not scroll with me, so you can add broken to the list too. And on top of that, for some reason, while it let me save throughout the remainder of the game, it wouldn't let me save once I hit the 8th world. I don't know why, but check that against it as well. You know, you all warned me about Eminem's Shell Shock. You told me, Puri, don't play this, it's gonna be terrible, and I did it anyway, so I get what I deserve, but I think next time we're gonna go with Skittles instead. Wonder what else is in this bag of M&Ms. Oh look! It's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Game Gear. Cause I only had like 10 copies of this, what's one more?